Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky. Welcome to my studio. Today we are once again going to attempt to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists. And today, on this auspicious day in recognition of the third anniversary of Russia's genocidal invasion of Ukraine, we are going to celebrate one of Ukraine's great artists, a hero who stood up to the previous great Russian dictator, Joseph Stalin, and paid for his life because of that, or paid dearly with his life for standing up for what he believed in and what's right. We're going to be looking at the work here of Mykola Kasperovych's Head of a Young Girl from around 1920. Unfortunately, this is one of only a handful of his artworks that remain, because almost all of his works were destroyed after he died, and much of his biography was erased. But as part of my goal here to help rehabilitate and to restore honor to great Ukrainian artists of the past, we are going to attempt to recreate this painting and bring it back into the foreground of people's imaginations. So let's look at Shubham says, what time is it in Canada right now? It is 11 o'clock in the morning right now. There's Brian. Hi, Brian. How are you doing? Okay, let's look at the plan for today. In a couple seconds, we're going to talk about how difficult today's painting is. Is this something you might want to try painting today? We'll talk about the materials required. We're going to get the image on the canvas, and I got a helpful way to do that, even if you're a complete beginner artist. Then we're going to stain it with some color. That's the Imprimatura. We're going to talk about Kasperovych's biography, or what is the little of which is I was able to dig up about him. Then we are going to, I don't know if we need to do an underpainting. We're going to work in the background, foreground, and I've got to pick my daughter up from school in less than 4 hours now, so we will be done in about 3.5 hours. Whether or not we're done, we're going to be done. That's the way it works. So let's just do a little bit of housekeeping. Just a quick reminder to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. About 60 to 80% of people who watch these videos are not subscribers. So just clicking that little subscribe button changes my life dramatically and helps the channel reach more people. And the more people who see art and believe that art is something they can do, I firmly believe we would live in a much more peaceful world. Just imagine if Vladimir Putin took a painting class. You know, he might have a little bit more joy in his life and find beauty in the world as it is around him, rather than trying to destroy his neighboring countries. So, but if, however, you want to support the channel with a small donation, you can use the PayPal link there. You can scan it and it'll take you right to the PayPal page where you can safely donate to support the channel. There are links down below as well if you want to support Ukrainian aid organizations. So there's lots of links down there. If you have some extra cash and you want to support the brave men and women who are fighting this terrible despot that is trying to destroy the democratic world, you can support them as well, and I'd be grateful if you did that, even beyond supporting me. However, if you want to support the channel, you can also send an e-transfer or check in the mail or contact me through the Facebook group and my website. All those links are down below. Speaking of the Facebook group, you can scan this code or enter in the little bit.ly address up top, or just go directly to Facebook and type in masterstudy.ca, and it'll take you to our Facebook group where you can donate or not donate, you can take a photograph of your artwork, upload it to the Facebook group, and once every 6 weeks I go through everything that's on the Facebook group and I give people free advice on how to improve it. So all of that's free, you don't have to pay a penny for it. All of this content I'm giving out into the world in hopes that more people find creative ways to express their thoughts, feelings, emotions, so that again, we could live in a more peaceful world. So let's jump to our first step, all the way up the top here. The scale of difficulty. So, is today's painting a painting you might feel comfortable attempting? Is this something maybe within your range of ability, where you're at right now? Because maybe you might feel you're not very good right now, or you're just starting. But hey, give it a few months, give it a few years. Things can change dramatically if you spend a little bit of time practicing some of the exercises we do in class. So here's the scale. We begin at beginner, novice, then go to intermediate, advanced, and expert. And I've planned today's episode to be right at the very top, the beginner episode, where little to no experience is required. So let's just kind of go through these here. Beginner is perhaps maybe you've never painted ever before. This is the first time you've ever seen me, and you're kind of like, I kind of want to make that painting. Well, I think you could probably do it. So I'm going to try to make today's painting as simple as I possibly can to encourage beginner artists to go out and buy some paint and join us on our creative journey here. However, if you're a novice painter and you've done a few of the exercises before, you've done the color wheel, you should find today's episode very, very straightforward. No problems whatsoever. If you're an intermediate artist, you should be able to do this painting relatively quickly, and perhaps even do a few extra little flourishes on the way. And I'll kind of point those out, places where you could add a little bit more complexity to it if you like. And certainly, if you're able to do all that, if you're a more advanced artist, you're making your own paintings, and this should be a bit of a breeze for you, right? So, there's Ari in the chat. Christina says, I love this. Sarah Cray from Let's Make Art Shows, painting national parks for this month's project. I love to see the artist community plugging in. Cool. And Bella, hi Bella. Let's take a moment now to talk about the supplies that might be required to make a painting like Mykola Kasperovych's Head of a Young Girl that we're going to do today. So I've done an entire episode where I go deep into depths about all these materials that we're going to briefly cover today in just about 5 minutes tops. And I've also got a free supply guide you can download by going to the Dropbox folder. You don't have to give me your email address or pay any money. It's not a scam or anything. It's all free. You can click on that link. You can download the PDF, or you can look at it on your phone while you're in an art supply store, and you can find exactly the materials I recommend. But let's go through this really briefly. Basically, we're going to be painting on a 9x12 sized canvas board or canvas panel, but you can use a stretched canvas, you can use a piece of plywood or paper, watercolor paper. You can do it all with at various different sizes. And we're going to be using acrylic paint. So we're going to use any of these. You could do some of the line work with a Posca pen. Well, maybe we'll talk about that as we go. I do try to use the most simple materials possible because not everyone has access to some of those like art pens, etc. Additionally, I strongly encourage you to have a couple of spare rags or paper towels nearby to clean up the inevitable mess that will happen if you're not prepared. If you're prepared, mistakes almost never happen. It's only when you think, I'll go get some paper towels tomorrow, and we'll just, I'm sure nothing could possibly go wrong today. We're going to be using a method called the split primary palette. Now, I didn't invent this method. It was invented back in the well, you could go all the way back to maybe the late 1800s when it first really appears, popularized in the 1940s by Andrew Loomis. But it is definitely my goal to make this as widespread as possible because it's so intuitive, it makes so much sense. I wish I learned how to paint using this particular method. Essentially, it means by splitting the primaries in half, we have 2 yellows, 2 reds, 2 blues, because every single color is either warm or cool. Or you could think of it as some colors kind of lean towards orange, making them warm, and some colors lean a little bit towards green, which makes them cool. So the benefit of learning about color temperature is it can help us mix the colors we want and help us create the illusion of depth within a painting, because warm colors appear to advance, cool colors appear to recede. So even if you're an abstract painter like Jackson Pollock or Mark Rothko, you can use these color relationships to create a tremendous amount of depth in an abstract artwork, which is kind of wild. And again, also helps you mix the colors you want, because you just have to ask yourself, where do I want this color to be within the space of the painting? Do I want it to appear like as if it's close to the viewer, like it's advancing forward, or do I want it to look like it's receding into the background, like a mountain or a sky, right? If you want it in the background, use your 3 cool colors. If you want it to advance forward, use your 3 warm colors. It's as simple as that. It's a little bit more complicated in practice, but essentially, if you keep those in mind, it is majorly helpful. Now, I'm going to be using this particular brand of acrylic paint, these Amsterdam paints. I'm not sponsored, not paid by Amsterdam. I've never been given a drop of free paint or a discount on paint, a vacation anywhere, even though I've been offered all of the above, because I want to keep all of these episodes completely free of promotion, so you know that I'm giving you honest advice. That's why I depend on support from people like yourself through the donations that I've been so grateful to receive over the years. But these are the colors I would choose that I have chosen to do this painting. Now I'm going to go through a whole bunch of different brands here that you could use instead, because maybe you can't find these Amsterdam paints at your local art supply store. But I'll go through all of these here. Lots of comments in the chat. I'll get to that in a second. It's hard to do 2 things at once. I'm a one-track train over here. Again, you can do what we're doing with basically any brand of paint that exists, and all of this is contained within that PDF document that's on our Dropbox folder, the very first folder at the top of if you click on that link. Now, there are a few brands I do not recommend, however, like this Museum Color out of Toronto, Peebo, which is a massive global brand, arguably maybe one of the largest paint companies in the world. Neither Mary's here out of China or Fevicryl out of India. All 4 of these paints, what they do is they add a lot of titanium white, too much. Even Amsterdam puts a little bit of white in all of their colors. Paint brands, especially less expensive paints, add white as a filler to make the paint appear more opaque. But what it does is it tints the color down. Tinting is when we add white to a color, and that makes it more pastel. So while it might be more opaque, it makes it more pastel, and that also means it's impossible for us to make a black. And if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I like mixing my own black as opposed to using the black from the tube, even though somewhere in here, oh, I have a black tube, but I bought this tube of paint 4 years ago, and almost, I'd say 80% of the black is still in that tube of paint, because I can mix my own black, and I like to show people how to do that. So if you go to the dollar store and you buy your paints there, you're also very unlikely to be able to mix your own black. Let me just quickly check in with all of these comments. Oh, there's Stephanie. Hi everybody, I'm listening. Crazy world needs more art and beauty. I agree. Pascaline, hello Pascaline, bonjour. Bella says, would you advise, even if not your tutorial, I am Payeb superhero from my 7-year-old grandson. Just wondering. I don't know, what does that mean? I am Payeb, a superhero. So I don't know. I don't understand what that means. I don't know if that's. Maybe let me know who that is. I don't know if that's a typo or an actual superhero that I haven't heard of. Stephanie says, "What is a Posca pen?" A Posca pen is an acrylic paint pen. Oops, I'll focus that first. So it's basically a pen that instead of ink coming out, acrylic paint comes out of, and these are really fun to use. You can buy them in different widths. These are I think the finest, these 0.7 millimeter, so less than a millimeter in width. So you can do quite fine details with them, which is, you know, much easier. Instead of trying to use a paintbrush to do very fine line work, you can use a Posca pen and you can do all that work just as if you were drawing with a pencil or a pen. And they're somewhere between $3 to $5 a pen, and surprisingly they last a lot longer than I thought. I bought these maybe 4 years ago expecting I might be able to get 1 or 2 uses out of them, and they're still working. I mean, I don't use them all the time, but even then, the fact that often you use any kind of paint or a marker of any kind, if you don't use it after a year, they dry up. I've been super surprised that those Posca markers still function after, you know, sitting in a box for months and months unused. So highly recommended. Oh, thanks Bella for helping to answer. Nguyen says, "Hi, I'm learning drawing through your teaching playlist. Now you're live. I just wanted to say thank you, sir." Thank you very much. That's so cool. I love that you're doing the drawing course and you find it useful. That's what it's there for, and I'm so glad that you're taking advantage of that opportunity. Join the Facebook group. Upload the drawings you're making as part of that course. I would love to give you free feedback. Celebrate the journey that you've started, and I want to encourage you to go all the way to the end of that playlist and then continue drawing with us, because we're doing more drawings at least once every month going forward from now. So I'd love to see you in some of those new live streams coming up. Obel says, "Michael, I'm painting Superman. It's a typo. I'm sorry." Okay, that's what I was wondering. I was like, would you... So what is the question? Because you said, would you advise to paint Superman for your grandson, your 7-year-old grandson? Sure. I mean, it's the Superman that we did as part of the Master Studies series. There is one there in the Dropbox folder under... In fact, let me find it. Oh my goodness, who did the Superman? It's oh no. Why isn't it coming up? I've done so many of these episodes, you can see that there's, you know, almost 300 of these folders, and within some of these folders there's 5, 6, 10 different paintings we've done as part of these classes. Oh my goodness. So my mind... I feel like it starts with an M. No. Joe Shuster. Okay, there it is. Why didn't I typed Superman in there. Yeah, so we did Superman there. I don't know how long ago we did that. Maybe 3 years ago. I mean, that turned out awesome. If you follow the steps that I did, you could recreate this painting. It is a little bit more on the complex side of things. Where did I rank this? I put this in the intermediate folder. I would definitely say it's on the higher end of the intermediate spectrum there. But yeah, go right ahead, try doing that. You can certainly cut some corners. Instead of doing the background as complex as it is, I think you could probably maybe just put a big yellow or orange background, and that would cut out, you know, probably a couple of hours worth of work for sure. But yeah, I'm sure if you did that painting, your grandson mind would be completely exploded and melted. They'd be so excited. I think that would be a pretty cool thing to do for sure. Okay, let's go back to... Let's go to our next step. What else is good to know? I'll check that out for sure, although mine is almost done. Cool. I'd love to see how it turned out. Yeah, let's see it, Bella. That's great. Next step here is to do the image transfer. Now, I have done an entire 45 episode basic drawing course that's here on YouTube, totally free. About 1,000 people do that class every single day, or start the class every single day. It's the most popular thing I've ever done. There's almost 1 million people who've done that course. So again, it's totally free, and if you want to learn how to draw, you could draw this out. But just to save us a little bit of time, I'm going to do what's called an image transfer onto the canvas. So to find this image, you can scan the Dropbox QR code here, or enter in that web address. It's the same place that you can find the material supply guide. And so let's just, I'll go back here. So if we click in that, the PDF for the supply guide is at the very top, the very first folder, 01. But let's go to today's image. Where did I put it? Okay, here's Mykola Kasperovych. Now you're going to see 4 files in here. There's 2 versions of the outline I did. One's a PDF, one's a JPEG, whatever's easier for you to print. And then you'll also see 2 versions of the painting, which was originally square. I've made it more rectangular just by extending the top and bottom of the painting. The original has she's wearing pink clothes, and there's a red background. In a different version that I included to celebrate and honor Ukrainian heritage, I've changed her top of her shirt to be yellow and the background to be blue, in like the Ukrainian flag. So either one, if you want to choose, they're virtually identical except the colors are different. I mean, they are identical, just except different colors. So you can download that. Oh, cool. There's Wittek says, hey, greetings from Poland. I'm also attending your course on drawing, and you are the person who got me interested in drawing again. That's so cool. That's, mind blown. That's so neat. Well, thank you, my friend, and thank you, and to all the people of Poland for supporting Ukraine. I don't have to tell people in Poland know exactly what Ukraine's going through, because we've been there before 100 years ago, right? And CMD says, hi from Ukraine. I'm studying your course as well. A very good course. Maybe a little strangely noticed that when I draw with you, that is what you are, it turns out better than when I am alone from the environment. How do I fix that? Ooh, good question. That often happens when you're doing any kind of activity and you're working with the teacher and the teacher's right there. It kind of might give you an extra little bit of confidence that you feel because you're kind of following along with somebody else. So you versus when you start trying to do it on your own, it can feel a little bit like you're swimming without swimming without a life vest, or paddling without a paddle, or there's a better metaphor out there. But yeah, it can feel a little bit, it's definitely different when you're working on artwork all by yourself and you don't have that that guidance right there with you. But that's a temporary feeling that eventually, as the more and more you work, the more confident you're going to feel and the better you're going to get. So don't be discouraged. Just recognize that that's part of the experience of learning art, or really learning anything in general. You know, just think about, you know, your first day at school when you were a kid. You know, everything seemed new and overwhelming, and you know, you got through that. You'll get through this as well. So it just takes a little bit of a leap of faith, and I bet you're doing better than you probably think or believe that you're doing. I see that all the time when I'm teaching in person, and I often will go around and people are like, oh, don't even look, it's so bad. And I'm like, no, let me see. And I'm like, that's great. Tell me what's wrong with it. And they're like, well, look at the eye. Oh, it's so bad. I think that's looking pretty good. Actually, I don't even think that there's a problem with the eye. I think it's just because you haven't painted the hair yet. And because the hair is blank, it makes the person look like they're bald. And of course it's going to make them look strange if they are known to have hair, and then all of a sudden you paint them without any hair, or their hair's not painted yet. Of course it's going to look strange. So I always suggest keep on moving forward. Don't lose faith. I'm sure you're on the right track. Shubham says, where can I share my drawings? You can join our Facebook group. The link is down below, and join the Facebook group, and then upload your drawings to the Facebook group, or paintings for that matter. Asanul says, hell yeah, me too. He got me so inspired that I studied it further, and now I'm into fine art school. Yeah, that's awesome. What an achievement. I love that. Blows my mind that you started drawing with me in these classes and now you're in art school. Like, that's so cool. I'm so proud of you. Wow, that just totally made my day. That's why I love doing these things, just being able to connect with people like yourselves around the world. Okay, I gotta get painting here because I gotta pick my daughter up from school in a few hours. So let's get to work. So, what have we done? We have. Let me just make sure I cover all my bases here. So if you go to that Dropbox folder, again, you're going to see well, this is the original painting, and even then, as I said, the original is a square format painting. It's actually quite small. We'll see that in a moment. But I've just extended the top and bottom of the painting so that it's a rectangular format, because that's a little bit more common canvas size for people. I've also done a version where I swapped out the foreground and background colors so that it looks like or uses the colors of the Ukrainian flag, if that's something you might want to do. And to be honest, even at this very moment, I don't know which version of these I'm going to do. I was planning on doing the Ukrainian flag version, but I might go back to the original. Honestly, I would say probably Mykola Kasperovych would be probably fine with either one. He was, a fierce supporter of Ukrainian independence. So I think if I did this version, that's not on camera. I feel like if I did this version, he would be more than happy and proud. And if I did the original version, he would be also quite happy too. So you let me know in the chat, which version of this painting should we do? Should we do the original one with the red background, or this other version with the blue background like the Ukrainian flag? Depending on the votes in the chat there, that's the version that I'll do today. Anyway, there is also the outline that I did using the Procreate app on my iPad Pro. I just traced it out, and so you can download this and print it out on your computer or printer at home or printer at work if you can stay a little bit later and just put that print job through and do a little bit of personal printing at work. So let's get to this here. So many great comments in the chat. I just get so excited and distracted. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to use some graphite paper or carbon paper, charcoal paper. They are technically different things, but they do exactly the same thing. And I'm going to slide that under here. Just make sure you get the right side down. My daughter likes to take my pens and bang them on the table and ruins all my pens. So it's always, I either have to hide all my pens or they get ruined. So I think this one will do. When you do these outlines also, you don't have to like press super hard. I was just teaching a class yesterday and with a bunch of beginner painters, and they're like going over like, you could almost feel the amount of effort they're putting into do the image transfer. You don't have to press that hard. The harder you press, the darker your lines, of course, will be. But they don't need to be that dark. So, because of course we're going to paint over all of them. And if they're really, really dark, it can be, those lines will keep showing through multiple layers of paint, which in some instances can be a good thing. But in other ways, that can be kind of frustrating, especially if you're trying to do very delicate details on the face, for instance. I love this little painting. It's such a beautiful little artwork. I'm glad it survived. Despite the fact that almost all of Kasperovych's work was destroyed by the Russian occupiers back in the 1930s, this is a really cool artwork that I think deserves to be more widely celebrated and known. This artwork is part of an exhibition that toured around Europe over the past few years. So if you're in Europe, you may have seen this painting. Now, I don't usually do all these details in the hair. I'm not really sure why I'm doing this right now. Started, so I'm not going to stop, but especially doing these areas, you probably want to just be careful you're not going too dark, too hard, because in the original these lines are quite subtle. And again, the harder you press, the darker those lines are going to be. Okay, almost done here. Hi, Sunny. Nice to see you in the chat. Great to see you back again. Whittick says, both versions of the painting are great, but I think that the yellow and blue looks more interesting. Yes. That's tricky, yeah. Sunny says, so are we just drawing a girl? Well, I'm right now drawing a girl, but I'm going to be painting this girl here in a moment, so... but you're certainly welcome to draw a girl, or just draw a girl if you like. Okay. So, that's ready. Why does that look so... Was that not on camera the whole time? Usually I do these streams at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 11 in the morning, and even though this is like my third cup of tea today, I don't know how I've... Man, that is dark. Oh, I remember at the end of last week's episode, I darkened everything because it was so... What was it, 8? Darn it, I can't remember what my settings are. I used to have it pinned up there. Okay, anyway. Hopefully that's not too bright, or hopefully it's a little bit brighter. Okay, let's move on here. The next step I want to do now is called the Imprimatura. The Imprimatura is a stain that we put over top of the surface of the painting, and it's a concept that goes back 600 plus years. It was really popularized by artists of the Renaissance like Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Michelangelo. Not the other Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, Donatello, who was a sculptor and who also... was a generation older than Leo, Raph, and Mike. So, the Imprimatura is essentially applying the first layer of paint. It's the prime layer. And what it does is it just gives the painting a little bit of extra character. I've been doing this for years, and what I tend to do is use a warm yellow. I like this, the quality that I get from the warm yellow as an Imprimatura. Typically, though, artists would use a bit more of a brownish color, like a kind of brick red type of earthy red. I like the yellow because it's just a little bit brighter, and I just like bright colors. So I'm going to mix this together. I put about 40% water to 60% paint. You don't really want to add more water to acrylic than 50-50. Otherwise, it's you're really breaking down the glue that holds the pigment together, the binder. So once I mix this in, then I'm just going to paint this across the surface. You could skip steps like this, but I love doing this. There's all sorts of reasons to do it. I had that up on the screen just moments ago. But for me, a big part of this these days is just part of my painting routine. You know, like we all have routines. You get up in the morning, and some people read the news or newspaper, or check their phone, answer emails. Sometimes people go and sit out on the patio and watch the sunrise or whatever. And sometimes doing those kinds of things aren't necessarily essential to get your day started. But if you don't do it, sometimes you just feel like you're a little bit off that day. Right? It's like, I haven't had my coffee today. Well, you don't need your coffee to survive, although I'm sure some people will say, actually, I do. But, you know, sometimes if you don't have it, you're just like, oh, I just feel totally disoriented. I'm out of step. I'm off my routine. And so I really like doing this because it doesn't take any brain power on my behalf. Very simple to do. And yet, I like doing this as like a transitional activity from other things in my life, so that I'm literally painting right now, but I don't really have to think about how I'm painting or what to do. It's just, I just take my yellow, put a little bit of white in it, and boom, I'm painting. I just love doing this step. Okay. One thing you'll notice I just did here is I cleaned my brush off on a rag before I put it into the water. Now, while my water is now yellow, if I just took my brush full of paint, put it in the water here, this water would be much more yellow, and there would be a lot more pigment in it, and that could be problematic, and then I might want to change my water every 10 minutes if I kept doing that kind of thing. So by cleaning your brush off on the water before you put it in your water, I can paint for like 8-9 hours, as I've done many a times here, with just one little mug full of water. Okay, where am I here? So while this is drawing, I'm just going to take a small little break here because I want to talk a little bit about the biography of today's artist, Mykola Kasperovych. So let's look at some of the folders I've got opened. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is today's artist, there's very little information online about Kasperovych. Partly, or really largely, almost entirely because Kasperovych was declared an enemy of the state by Russia and the Soviet Union, and he was arrested, tried in a kangaroo court, and executed, and all of his artwork that could be found was destroyed. So that also meant his biography was essentially erased from history as if he never existed. That was something very typical under the Stalin regime. So what little is known of him is I went through everywhere I could find on the internet, and I compiled this together as a biography on our Facebook group. So this is probably the most detailed biography in English that you'll find anywhere on the internet. Is the biography that I cobbled together from a number of different sources online. So I might actually refer to my own notes here as opposed to other sources on the internet, just because I put the effort to put all this together. Mykola Kasperovych is born in 1885 and dies in 1938, which, how old is that? 38, that's 38 plus 15 is... Well, I usually do this before. You could tell that I went to art school and not to math school. So he would have been 53 years old when he died, when he was executed by the Russians. And during his lifetime, he made massive contributions, not only to Ukrainian art as an artist himself, but arguably more so as a protector of Ukrainian art and heritage, an advocate for Ukrainian identity and independence, and even more specifically as a restorer of ancient Ukrainian art. And really, we owe him a massive debt of gratitude for preserving Ukrainian art that had been singled out to be destroyed by the Russian occupiers, as well as saving Ukrainian art that had fallen into disrepair and, again, was scheduled to be destroyed. So many of the great murals and frescoes in major Ukrainian museum, like literally every single major museum in Ukraine, every single major cathedral in Ukraine, Kasperovych was, his hand touched all of the great artworks. He was up on scaffolds cleaning and repainting and fixing artworks that over centuries had, started to fall apart, crack, and so one might say that had it not been for Mykola Kasperovych, a huge amount of Ukrainian cultural heritage would have been lost forever. But the fact that he rescued those pieces, brought them back to their former glory, is one of the greatest contributions to Ukrainian culture that I can honestly think of. It's incalculable the effect, the profound effect he had on Ukrainian culture. And I'll even add to that, Ukrainian culture is a shared culture of Polish people, of Turkish people, Iranian people, Russian people, Viking people, because Ukraine, for better or worse, is in large part a huge flat landscape without very many natural barriers. So throughout the history of Ukraine, it has basically been invaded and occupied by pretty much every single culture nearby, and so the people of Ukraine are descended from all of the various different people who at one point in time occupied Ukraine. And so and those are the people that helped build Ukrainians' culture, for better or worse. So the fact that Kasperovych helped to preserve the artworks that all of those people made for almost 10 centuries, as I think is also a gift to Polish people, Russian people, Turkish people, Iranian people, Persian people, northern Scandinavian people, all the people that came through the land of Ukraine. So, but let's kind of rewind a little bit. So Kasperovych was born in the countryside about 80 kilometers north of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, and grew up on kind of a farm, a ranch outside of the capital city, in a very small, or even, I don't even think it was a village. He was kind of like outside the village. But his father, Ivan, was a noble, from a noble lineage, so that probably enabled that young boy to have opportunities he might not have had otherwise, because being an artist 100 years ago, wherever it was on planet Earth, was, a bit of a risk. Even, when I was growing up, most of my friends in art school, everybody's parents were like, I don't know if this is such a good idea, but if you really want to do this. So, but you can just imagine, like, my own father grew up on a farm in Saskatchewan, and his parents were definitely not supportive of him going to art school and becoming an artist, so he became a doctor. So I'm very fortunate that when I was growing up, my own father said to me, make sure you do something you feel passionate about and not something that you want to do just to make money. And I've ever since then felt like every day super blessed to have had that support from my family. So almost nothing that is known about Kasperovych's youth besides his birth, because again, almost all of the records of his life were destroyed by Stalin and his henchmen. So we don't know really what his interests in art were, or what he did as a child, where he was living, where he kind of basically grew up. But until basically he's about 16 years old, where the records show that he studied art in Moscow. So he travels, he leaves his ancestral homeland, goes to Moscow, which would have been, at the time, kind of the big city. It would have been like going to New York, the most cosmopolitan city in the vicinity, even more so than Kyiv by this time. And so he studies there, and then later continues his study at the Krakow Academy of Arts in Krakow, Poland, where he's awarded a silver medal for his achievements. And those kinds of medals were quite common in academies back in the day, because essentially the academy would have these kind of painting competitions. Students would submit their work for evaluation, and there would be an exhibition every year, and the best artworks in those exhibitions would be given medals. So the fact that while he's in school he's given a silver medal shows that he was one of the best students at the time he was in school there in Krakow. After graduating, Kasperovych moves to Paris, which in 1909 is like the place to be if you're an artist anywhere on Earth. At this time, 1909, this is when Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque are inventing Cubism. Henri Matisse is the most famous artist on Earth, and the Fauvist painters are everywhere. The avant-garde movements are thriving in Italy and Germany, Spain, all over the place. They're like avant-garde art is thriving. So it's no mistake that Kasperovych goes to Paris, and while he's there, he has probably his greatest success of the early part of his career, and probably the biggest achievement in terms of his international career, in which he exhibits at the Salon des Indépendants in 1910. And that would have been a huge breakthrough for a young artist. Like, at this time in 1910, he's like 25 years old. So to be exhibiting alongside really the greatest avant-garde artists in the world in 1910 is a huge achievement for anybody, but particularly some unknown kid from Ukraine. So I just find that, I'm very proud of him being of Ukrainian descent myself, but I think that's pretty cool. It's at that same time, during that same year, that he befriends another artist named Michael Boychuk, and let's... Where are we here? Let's make this bigger. So Michael Boychuk is one of the most famous Ukrainian artists, avant-garde artists of all time. We haven't featured him on an episode yet, but we have featured his younger brother, Timothy. And those of you who've been painting with me for a while may have done this painting, The Women at the Apple Tree. This was one of the few paintings that Timothy Boychuk did before he died under mysterious circumstances, in which we'll get to here shortly. So we have looked at the Timothy or the Boychuk brothers in the past, but the fact that Mykola Kasperovych befriends Mikhailo Boychuk is kind of a big deal. The fact that they become best friends is certainly a statement of the kind of circles that Kasperovych is traveling within. And speaking of travels, these two young artists go on what turns out to be a breakthrough voyage together. They travel down to Italy and they spend a couple of months touring all of the great museums in Florence and Venice and see the great Italian masterpieces in person for the first time. I'm sure they would have learned about these, artists like Leonardo and Raphael and Botticelli by reading about them in textbooks back when they were students, but to go and travel and see those works in person in 1910 totally blew their mind and set them on a completely different course in life. Because again, 1910, this is like the heyday of avant-garde painting. And these two young, impressionable men, I'm sure, were caught up in the spirit of cubism and fauvism and futurism and vorticism and every other ism, every art movement that was happening in Europe at the time. And the fact that they go to Italy and look at Renaissance artwork and Byzantine artwork and medieval artwork and fall in love with it is a big deal, because that's about as backwards, I guess just retrograde, I guess you might say, as opposed to avant-garde. Retrograde is the opposite. People consider that going backwards, when you like retro, you're dressed retro, right? Or have a retrospective, it's about looking back. So while the rest of their peers are looking forward into avant-garde art, you have Kasperovych and Boychuk, who are seeing these older artworks by the Italian masters, and their minds are blown. And so I'm just going to highlight a few of the examples of the kind of art that they would have seen. So they would have been absolutely familiar with Byzantine art, both of them growing up in Ukraine. This is the kind of art they would have seen in the cathedrals, the churches growing up. Byzantine art is a kind of art style movement period of time that arises from the Eastern Roman Empire, and continue, like, while the Roman Empire collapsed, we still have in Eastern Europe the Byzantine art. The Eastern Roman Empire kind of continues on, and probably in many ways some of the more famous medieval artworks are Byzantine works. That's maybe not the right. That's not. I should say that. I think when people think of medieval artworks, they might be inadvertently confusing them with Byzantine artworks. They're almost always, as I guess a lot of medieval artwork is almost all religious, but there's a particular kind of style to Byzantine art with these kind of often very striking black outlines that to me, when I look at this type of stuff, it reminds me a lot of ancient Roman frescoes like that were found in Pompeii, for instance. And so this kind of style of artwork that kind of harkens back to the real classical period. Okay, let me just let's skip through that. So essentially, from this trip, both of those artists kind of embark on their styles change completely into what later becomes known as Boychukism, after Mykola Boychuk himself, right? Or I guess both of the Boychuk brothers, Timothy and Mykola, kind of established this how would you call it? It's kind of like it's like a neoclassical art movement, even though neoclassical is an actual art movement that is totally different than this. But it's a style of modern art that is harkening back, embracing the styles of of art that was made 500, 1,000 years before. And the style of painting, like the painting we're going to do right today, is a great example of Boychukism, of which Kasperovych becomes a major adherent of and promoter of. He's basically, I mean, to say that he was a Boychukist artist, it does a little bit of a disservice to Kasperovych, because, Boychuk was his best friend, so that would be kind of like saying Georges Braque was a Picassoist artist. Well, it's not really fair to Braque to say that he's painting in Picasso's style, because they were best friends, and Braque and Picasso kind of invented Cubism together. But for simplicity's sake, that's the name that has kind of grown out of these movements. Alaskan Mal says, "Hey, Markowsky." Barbara says, "Hi, Michael. Hi, everybody. Great to see Ukrainian artists featured tonight." Awesome. Thanks, Barbara. Maybe this time is a little bit better for you right now, since you're on the other side of the big pond. Okay. Well, let's come back to this particular painting as well. Let me go back to my notes again. So, after going on this big tour to Italy with Mykola Boychuk and being totally blown away by the great early Renaissance art by artists like Botticelli in particular, by the great Byzantine artists that they'd been familiar before, they both return to Ukraine. I can't remember exactly where Mykola himself returned to, but Kasperovych moves to Lviv, and while he's in Lviv, he studies art restoration under Ilarion Savetsitsky at the National Museum there in Lviv. And so he's basically studying with the greatest art restorer in Ukraine, and side by side learns how to mix colors like a master, because when you're restoring artwork, you're trying to match colors exactly, so that ideally a great restoration of an artwork is invisible. You don't even know that somebody did anything to the painting, because it's indistinguishable from the original thing. So, talk about what we're doing, matching colors. Kasperovych would have been absolutely one of the greatest colorists of his time in his knowledge of color and art materials. Another thing that he does is he collaborates with Mykola and his younger brother Timothy to restore one of the major paintings in Trinity Church, and I believe this is the Trinity Church in Kiev, which is one of the great cathedrals of the world. So again, you have these two great Ukrainian artists up on scaffolds, restoring artworks that are, for them would have been about 800 years old at that time. And so they're not just going to let anybody get up there in Ukraine's biggest, most famous historic church in the country and doodle around on the ceiling, right? You have to have certain kind of expertise, credentials, bona fides to be given that honor. So that should kind of say everything there. As I mentioned, I guess as I mentioned earlier, Kasperovych would go on to basically have his hand touching and restoring pretty much every single major great artwork in the history of Ukraine. Right? So you could just if you would imagine if Pablo Picasso went back and restored every single major Spanish artwork, or Matisse went and restored every major artwork in France, and he's up there in Notre Dame Cathedral fixing things, and then he's over in the Louvre touching up the Mona Lisa. That's the scale of ability we're talking about here, right? Imagine Emily Carr is flown out to the National Gallery of Canada and she's fixing like Paul Kane's paintings or something, right? I mean, we're talking, master level ability. I know I just keep on repeating that, but it's true. And since there's very little of anybody talking about this artist, since most of his biography's been destroyed, I feel like I have to I'm doing my best to kind of really highlight these facts. So, during 1917 to 1921, there is a, which also coincides with the Russian Revolution, there is also simultaneously the Ukrainian War of Independence, because Ukraine has been under, as I said, the boot of Russia for centuries. What's going on in Ukraine right now isn't a new thing. It's been something that's been happening pretty much every couple of generations for about 300 years. And during a brief period of time, from about 1917 to 1921, Ukraine was able to achieve its independence through an armed conflict with what eventually becomes the Soviet Union, which is essentially a de facto Russian-led organization. And this is it's just like any revolution, like lots of chaos, different people kind of taking power for short periods of time and then are overthrown by another group, and different factions are sponsored, supported by outside interests. And so it's a period of great confusion and fear. And it's during that time that Kasperovych is teaching art in Myrod, which is a town about 260 kilometers east of Kiev. Today, Myrod is considered to be like a resort town, kind of like, I don't know, well, it's not a ski town, but it's right on this river, and it's a beautiful place that's believed to have healing properties. So the wealthy would travel to this kind of town and spend a few months being healed by the natural hot springs and things. And then he also eventually, by the end of 1921, he's a full professor teaching at the National Academy of Arts of Ukraine in Kiev. And just while just before I forget, I just want to point this out. is that here's on Twitter, or X, as Musk has rebranded it, a page called Ukrainian Art History, which is highlighting today's painting. And you can see here's the original format, this square format. And they mention here it's in the collection of the National Art Museum of Ukraine, which has been suspended by Elon Musk. For some reason, the National Museum of Art in Ukraine is not allowed on Twitter. Because, goodness gracious, who would, those controversial art museums, they're always up to no good, spreading lies and stuff, so we best ban them from social media. I saw that, I was like, are you kidding me? Elon Musk has banned the Ukrainian art museum? Okay, that's interesting, but anyway, so by this time, by 1921, Kasperovych is a full professor at the best art school in Ukraine. At this time, 1921, he's, how old is he here? 90. So I guess he's in his mid-30s, I would say, somewhere around there. Again, math, not my strong suit. And really spends the next decade and a half of his life, really up until his execution, making art like we're looking at today. And again, this is one of the few that remain. And also traveling around Ukraine, restoring all of the great artworks in the country. So, as I mentioned here, he was a pioneer in highlighting, celebrating ancient Ukrainian paintings and iconography, and he was directly involved in protecting many major monuments, because as his role within the culture began to grow, when there was word that certain cathedrals or artworks were under threat of demolition by the Russian occupiers, he was amongst the voices that would stand up and say, and whatever excuses he would make, he might say something, well, actually, it turns out this great Ukrainian artist, his parents were Russian, so please don't destroy it, because then you'd be destroying Russian history. Right, so we wouldn't want to do that. And then, oh yes, okay, yeah, no, we won't tear down that building. Yes, thank you for alerting us of this very important fact. But sadly, eventually, on March 3rd, 1938, during one of Stalin's genocidal purges, Kasperovych was arrested by the NKVD, which is the Soviet secret police, under accusations of counter-revolutionary terrorist activity. And under days of interrogation, he was forced to confess to being part of an insurgent operation. Because, of course, university professors are generally always the ones who are up to the most devious terrorist activity, right? Of course. So the indictment claimed that Kasperovych was engaged in espionage, and a few months later, on May 7th, 1938, Kasperovych was executed and buried in a mass grave somewhere in Ukraine. I do want to just, for those people who may not be aware, that Ukraine, as well as a number of other parts of the Soviet Union, including like Latvia, Poland, Belarus, Kazakhstan, all these different countries which were absorbed into the USSR, Stalin did what was called the Great Purge, or the Great Terror, in which essentially they went around and rounded up all of the greatest intellectuals, writers, painters, dancers, filmmakers, musicians, and executed all of them. So literally an entire generation of Ukraine's greatest painters, sculptors, architects, and everything were arrested and executed. This becomes known as the executed Renaissance, in which we're talking tens of thousands of all of the greatest people. Anybody who was not pledging their undying love for Joseph Stalin and Russia was killed, right? And if this sounds, well, I mean, just think about what's going on in the United States right now with Donald Trump and people being forced to sign loyalty pledges, and if you're not signed a pledge, then you're fired. Obviously, that's different than being rounded up and executed, but, you know, that's how these things start. I'm not going to say that that's, you know, we're on track for some kind of genocide in the United States, but it's an alarming sign, to say the least, when, you know, the great minds of a generation are exiled or ridiculed and such. So that's certainly a worrying sign for our friends and brothers and sisters down in the United States. But this executed Renaissance, as it's known in Ukraine, is one of the great tragedies. This is the kind of thing that allows someone like Vladimir Putin to claim that Ukraine doesn't exist, that there is no such thing as an independent Ukrainian identity, culture, or heritage, that Ukraine is just a made-up concept by Vladimir Lenin, because there's nothing that remains or nothing that exists of Ukrainian culture. Because why? Because Stalin tried to kill them all and destroy their biographies, erase them from history. So that's why artists like Kasperovych that we're talking about today, virtually very, very little of them is known. Almost none of their artwork survives, because there was a concerted effort in between 1936 to 1938 to destroy all of that knowledge, and instead to send in waves of Ukrainian migrants and Russian migrants and Russian intellectuals into these various satellite states that Russia was occupying, and replace them with Russian people. All right, so again, just take that for a grain of salt when Putin talks about Ukraine not being a real country. Well, it's because Russia has been on this 100-year genocidal, insane quest to erase everything about Ukrainian history. So, and being of Ukrainian descent myself, it's alarming. I was talking to somebody the other day that, you know, Vladimir Putin is sort of like a jealous ex-boyfriend, an abusive, jealous ex-boyfriend, who just can't move on. Ukraine separated from Russia back at the fall of the Soviet Union, generously gave back all of the nuclear weapons that they had to Russia in exchange for assurances that Russia would never invade, and also assurances from the United States that the United States would never be coercive towards Ukraine. And so those Munich Accords signed by Russia and the United States have obviously since been broken. Crap. Okay, I gotta get to painting here. But these are just things that I feel very passionate about, and being of Ukrainian descent, and when I hear these things on being repeated by so-called well-known intellectuals in not just Russian media but American media, I find it very, very alarming. So I just want to kind of put that out there and help spread the news that there is such thing as Ukraine. It's bizarre that I have to even say those words, but that's the world we're living in today. Okay, anything else I want to mention? Okay, I want to talk very, very briefly about today's painting before I move on. There's not very much known about it, but I do want to say what is kind of unique about today's painting and why it's of kind of particular interest to me, and I think also to Ukrainian heritage, is that this type of image, this and the composition, the way it's drawn and the way it's painted, is absolutely makes it one of the greatest examples of so-called Boychukism, this art movement or technique that was coined after Kasperovych's Mykola Kasperovych's best friend Mihailo Boychuk. That Boychukism was essentially, again, this way of bridging the avant-garde with ancient Byzantine and early Renaissance painting. And so this type of image where we see this young girl who's looking kind of quite stoically, kind of very still, mostly expressionless, and facing directly at the viewer, is just right out of the Byzantine playbook, right? The iconography, the composition is exactly the kinds of things that we saw in Byzantine art, back in the 1200s kind of thing. So it is very cool how Kasperovych has integrated these ancient art forms with modern art into this painting. The great tragedy is one wonders about all of the thousands of other artworks that he made that were destroyed by Russian authorities, and almost no records of any of those paintings exist. We don't have black and white photos that I know of anyway. So anyway, I'm super excited to paint this, and the goal is to try to paint this in its most simple fashion possible. So I think let's get ready to do that. I do see that there are probably 100 comments in here. Senga, hi Senga, nice to see you there. Senga says, Michael, I loved the hair drawing, the rabbit that we drew. I've not drawn anything for ages, so thank you. I've started drawing again. That's so cool. CMD says, thank you, Michael. Very interesting lecture on the history of art. Chris Taylor says, good evening. CMD says, I'm currently listening to a beautiful historical lecture on art. How are you? Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you for saying such nice things. Senga says, Michael always fills us in on the artist. Very interesting. I love how he talks about art with passion. You guys are so sweet. Barbara says, I've been watching the feeds, but finding it hard to stay awake after 2 a.m. This is a much better time for me. Yes, a lot of people say it's a better time for me too. Well, I'll keep that in mind. Maybe we can do more of these episodes at this time if this is something that seems to work better for people. Awesome. Ari says, my Polish family doesn't miss an opportunity to mention the Great Purge either. It's terrible. Right? And again, it's important for people to talk about these things because most people who aren't of Eastern European descent are totally unaware of it. These are not things that were talked about often in school, and actually a lot of families didn't talk about it either. In many ways, these were, strangely enough, very shameful and embarrassing moments in the history of the survivors. Just like, members of people who survived the Holocaust, it's not like those are the kinds of memories that they want to go on and tell stories about while they're talking to strangers on the bus. These are often the most terrifying moments of people's lives, things that people want to forget, that they almost want to pretend never happened. And there's also a tremendous amount of survivor's guilt that people feel because, you know, when you're the only one that remains from your entire village, like my family is amongst the only people that survived from the village that our ancestral home in Ukraine, because our village was completely obliterated, disappeared. It no longer exists on maps anymore. I remember my grandfather and my uncle went back to Ukraine before the fall of the Soviet Union, and they went around trying to find that village. And first of all, nobody wanted to even talk about it, but people would say it doesn't. Like they'd say it doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. People are like, what do you mean the town's gone? Well, they bulldozed it. It doesn't exist, right? And people were moved to cities as part of those collectivist programs, and what is known as the Holodomor, where Ukrainians were, millions of which who were starved to death and executed. Anyway, but yeah, it's important to talk about these things. Barbara says Michael is a breath of fresh air in the ghastly nonsense being spewed out at the moment. More painting, less war. That's a great slogan. I should make a t-shirt of that. I love that. Make art, not war. Those are great. I love those, guys. Yeah, maybe we should that's excellent. I love that. Make art, not war. Well, more painting, less war. Great slogans, you guys. I love that. Okay, I better get moving here. Goodness gracious. Okay. So, sometimes when we're painting faces, portraits, or other imagery, we might want to do an underpainting. And there's lots of different ways that artists define the idea of an underpainting. Sometimes that means basically painting just the basic shapes throughout the entire painting. For my purposes, often what I'll do is talk about maybe painting over some of the lines that we want to preserve because we might be afraid of them getting, covered up by subsequent layers of paint. So do I want to do an underpainting here? Is it important? Oh my goodness. What should we decide? I'm gonna mix a do I want to do that? Maybe I'll do a bit. I'm just gonna squeeze out the paint on my palette here. Now, I don't know exactly which paints I'm going to need, so I'm just putting them all down here. Obviously, you have the benefit of being able to scroll to the end of the video after it's been recorded and to see if I've used all of these paints, and if I haven't, then you know, okay, well, I just won't put that on my palette then. Chris Taylor says, I don't mind the late feeds. I'm a bit of a night owl, so it gives me an excuse to get loaded up on coffee with liberal doses of rum. That's great. That's pretty funny. Okay. Okay. Well. Here, I'm going to mute the microphone because I'm going to do a bit of banging. So if you ever have a jar of paint and you can't get the lid off, One of the things you can do is just give it a little bit of a bang so that the paint will kind of become unstuck, because acrylic paint is very similar to white glue, and so it will glue lids and things shut. Now, I couldn't find a tube of this cool red, so I'm just gonna, I have a jar of it. All of this is just actually paint that I've squeezed out of tubes that seemed otherwise empty, so I've talked about that many a times as well. Okay, so I'm thinking here now, I'm gonna mix up a black, and I've actually added a little bit more red and yellow so that this might be a bit more of a brown dominant black. Essentially, to mix a black, we want to use cool yellow, cool blue, and warm red. Because if we mix a cool yellow, cool blue together, we're going to get a green, a really nice bright green. The opposite of that bright cool green is warm red. And when we mix those two colors together, they're going to cancel each other out. Green and red, when they cross right through the color wheel, are going to become black. If they're a little bit further away from one another, they're going to make a brown. So to get that black, that's why we're swapping the warm red in from the cool red. So let's mix this up, because I think I want to get like a pretty dark brown, so I might even not even mix all of that blue into this mixture here. I quite like this colored like that, actually. So I think I'm going to keep it at this level of darkness. If I added all that blue in here, it would definitely go black, but I kind of like this brown. So I keep meaning to fix this paintbrush. Where does the other side of it go? I'm just gonna put some tape on it, even though until oh, it's because I keep forgetting to get the glue out. Okay. Okay, so I've got this dark brown, and I'm just going to paint over top of some of these features, and then I'm going to paint a skin tone over top of all of it. And that skin tone is going to have a little bit of white in it, and the thing is that white will cover up pencil lines, charcoal lines very, very quickly, very easily. So if I put too much white in there, it's entirely possible that my pencil lines could disappear completely. So by doing what I'm doing right now, it's possible that I might be able to or I mean, ideally what's going to happen is I should be able to see my lines through that layer of more opaque paint. And potentially, depending on how opaque my paint is, it might help me. I might not even need to do further outlines afterwards. I probably still will, but Now I know her eyes are blue. We'll paint them blue later on. Now, if I was painting this painting all by myself, I probably would not do what I'm doing right now. So I'm actually really just demonstrating this for like beginner, novice, maybe some intermediate artists who might be quite intimidated by the idea of making a painting and losing all of the pencil lines because they get covered up by subsequent layers. So because I've been painting for a couple of decades, I'm not afraid of losing some of those details in the face, because I feel confident enough that I'd be able to kind of find them again or kind of eyeball it. But I can understand if you're a beginner artist and you did the painting, as I'll show here in a few moments, and you covered up the face and all those lines disappeared, I could imagine some people being quite distressed by that. Alaskan Mal says, how do I send my art? So you can join the Facebook group. The link is down there below for that in the description. And upload your work to the Facebook group, and then every 6 weeks we do another feedback episode. We just did one 2 weeks ago, so it won't be for another month from now, but which sounds like a long time, but with the pace of life these days, it'll seem like next week, right? So CMDC is, I was able to get on the live broadcast for the first time today. Now I regret not being at the previous ones. However, I'm glad that there's a record. Well, it's never too late, right? I'm glad you're here now, and I don't usually paint at this time, but there's a lot of people there who've been saying that this is a great time for them, so maybe we'll see. I'd like to be able to make it work for obviously as many different people as possible. But then I also have to make it work for me too, right? Okay, so the next thing I'm just going to quickly do here is I'm just going to quickly blow dry the canvas, just so that when I paint layers over top of it, I don't smear and smudge this. Now, you don't need to use a hair dryer. You could just go and have lunch, come back in 10 minutes and it'll be dry. But since we're doing this live, I want to speed things up. So I'm just going to mute the microphone momentarily here. You know what is just super weird is already my painting looks a little bit different than the original. I'll just bring it back up on screen here. And I already find like this my version already maybe inexplicably sort of looks a lot like my daughter. Right? And so I find those things very strange. It goes to show how much you know, an artist might unconsciously project things into an artwork, because, you know, I've traced those lines, and yet somehow I can see my daughter's face right in this painting. It's just such a bizarre, weird thing, the way our brains and hands and things work. So I've mentioned before that, like, if you look at Rembrandt, the great Dutch artist, he's very famous for painting hundreds of self-portraits, but what's very funny is once you see his self-portrait, basically everybody he painted kind of looks like Rembrandt. They all kind of look like they're his family members or something. And I think it's because we I guess especially if you're an artist who's done a lot of self-portraiture, of which I have done in the past, when you draw faces, your hand just sort of goes along in the same way that you approach your own. I don't know how to describe it, but it's definitely, that is, I think it's kind of uncanny. We'll see if it comes. I mean, I'm very happy. Obviously, I love my daughter, so I'm happy that it looks like her. But if I thought I'd mention that because it's kind of weirding me out a little bit how that happened so quickly. The next step here is to paint the background and get a color in there as quickly as possible. And then we're going to go into the foreground and get some color there. Now, the question that I asked in the chat earlier is which version... Sorry, I think I'm going to have to redo that here. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to paint the background to today's painting as quickly as possible to fill it up with some color, and then we're going to go into the foreground and fill that up with color. And one of the things I asked earlier is which version of this painting should we do? Do we want to focus on the colors of the original version of this painting? Or, in celebration of Ukrainian heritage, do we want to replace the colors with the colors of the Ukrainian flag? I only saw one person comment in there that they thought that the Ukrainian flag might be the better choice, the more, I think, interesting choice. I think Chris said that. I really don't know. As much as I want to do this version, I feel compelled, though, to honor the artist's original artwork. Which one? Again, as I said off the top, I think that Kasperovych, being, you know, a fierce supporter of Ukrainian independence, I think he would be more than supportive of using these colors. If we wanted to use the colors of the Ukrainian flag, essentially what we'd want to use is some cool yellow on her clothing and cool blue in the background. Barbara says Ukrainian colors, Senga says Ukrainian. Okay, that's 3-0. Okay. If we wanted to do the original color, this background is a bit of a... I think it's a combination of our warm and cool reds, and then the color in the foreground, I think, is also a combination of... It's a little bit warmer. It's a bit more of a warm red, but I still think there's a bit of magenta in there as well. So, everyone wants Ukrainian colors. Okay, I'll go with the voice of the people here, since that's what's been suggested. Okay, so let's. I thank you so much for your feedback. Let's do that, and so I'm gonna now paint the background, which is our cool blue. Actually, I'm just gonna clean this brush off real quick. As I always say, it's best for this paint to end up on a rag and go into a landfill, then go into the water, first of all making the water really, really dirty, and potentially us having to clean the water 4 or 5 times throughout the course of a painting. But I also prefer that often this water, depending on where you live, is just going to go right out into the ocean, and then that gets eaten by the little fish who get eaten by the big fish, and then those big fish end up on our dinner plates. Acrylic paint, after all, is a plastic, so the less microplastics we pump out into the ocean, the less we have to eat it, and the other creatures on our beautiful planet have to eat. So that's a, you know, it's not ideal that that rag is going to go into the landfill later, but it's better in the landfill than in our food system. Okay. So is this clean enough? So, the voice of the people says Ukrainian color scheme. So, to do this, what we're going to do is mix a cool blue. Now, if I just paint this cool blue over top of my cool, or this warm yellow background, what's going to happen is it's going to go green. And as much as I love green, it's certainly not the colors of the Ukrainian flag. So in order to do this, I'm going to add some white paint here and do a layer of the cool blue with some white on it. Maybe I'm going to take a bit more blue here. I am, however, going to dilute this paint a little bit by adding matte medium in here. And the matte medium is going to make the paint more transparent. Matte medium is literally just acrylic paint without any color in it. And so by doing this, it's going to make a little bit of this yellow show through. Now, why would I want to do that? Because I just said I want to cover up. Because I want a little bit of this color coming through. A little bit of yellow in there. Because after all, that's kind of what we see in Kasperovych's painting too. He's got a little bit more transparency in his painting. In fact, I could probably put more matte medium in here. It's not really as transparent as I had planned, but that's okay because it is making I have more. I actually realized that I'm glad I did that because I probably would have ran out of paint halfway through painting this. I also like painting the edges of my painting. I've always been interested in that. That is kind of nice. Well, that color is certainly different than the original. It's not nearly as deep of a cool blue, and I can make it, obviously. I was planning on doing another layer, but that kind of bright blue is kind of cool, though, I gotta say. And one thing I do, after I kind of do outlines like this, I just go around and kind of brush the surrounding areas so that I don't have a kind of halo of paint around here. That usually, you know, when I see that in my own paintings, it drives me crazy. I mean, That is beautiful. It's, again, it's no, let's, you know, it's not as deep of a blue, obviously, but let's, if I've committed to doing the Ukrainian flag color, so let's keep on going. Again, it's, but I do want to say, though, if you're working on a painting and you've got colors on your brush and you start painting with them, but you realize, but it's the wrong color. What a bummer. I should probably change it. You don't have to change it. There's no law that says you've got to do it exactly like the original. You know, if you want to change this and paint the background purple or green or orange polka dots, go ahead and do it. Don't let anybody tell you you're doing it wrong. Those are just cranky people who say things like that. Barbara says, today of all days, Ukrainian colors are appropriate. 3 years since the invasion of Ukraine. So sad. Deborah says, hi, Michael. I'm cooking right now, and I will watch later. Thank you for all your work and a gift to us for teaching us. Thank you. Senga says, yeah, tell Trump and Musk to put it in their pipe and smoke it. Brian, hi Brian. Brian says, just in time to see you paint. I've got done watching the Drawing the Human Male Body episode. That is cool. That keep you busy, those drawing episodes. Okay. I'm gonna put, again, a bit of matte medium, man, that lid's glued shut, into my cool blue. Once again, because, you know, I want a little bit of transparency in my paints here. So, and there was a little bit of white there previously. I don't care if that gets a little bit on my brush. I know some people get really antsy about contaminating colors and all this kind of stuff, and that's why a lot of artists will use like palette knives. I personally kind of like it when there's a little bit of variety and variation in the paint. I just think it's kind of cool. It adds a little bit of flavor. Now this painting is wet too, so just before I start painting on here, I should blow dry this. Sometimes it's nice to be painting so-called wet on wet, or wet into wet painting, but because it can mix the colors and look really cool. But if I paint that right now, it's probably going to be super frustrating because I'll probably kind of start to remove some paint as I'm painting it, and I'll start to see more of that yellow kind of coming through. So if I just blow dry this and have a nice dried layer, I can paint that new blue on top, and I think it'll look gorgeous. Just gonna mute the microphone. Man, that blue is gorgeous. Okay, I think this is gonna look good. It's obviously gonna get darker. It's gonna darken this, but the fact that I've got this blue with a bit of white in there is gonna help make this color kind of pop. Whoa, that is beautiful. Okay, I'm glad you guys encouraged me to use that. Whoa, what a Beautiful color. Holy smokes. I can't remember the last time I used a cool blue in I don't know if we've ever done a painting like this with such saturated cool blue. Like a big flat area of color like this. Well, I'll say I was obviously I chose this painting and I made the thumbnail and switched the colors out for the Ukrainian flag, thinking that I might do this, so it's not out of nowhere. But I was, over the past, like 24 hours, thinking, well, I don't know, is it would be more honor, I want to honor these great artists, but is it kind of like sacrilegious to modify the painting in some way? Shouldn't I try to hue as close to the original as possible, but yet encourage other people to create their own versions? These are the insignificant things that keep me up at night. Things that people are like, really? That's what keeps you up at night? Man, first world problem, Michael. My goodness. Some of us are fighting for survival here. I might have to do a second coat of paint. So one thing, because this paint I added that matte medium, I don't know if it comes across on camera so much, but there is kind of areas where it's I can see the brush strokes, right? I can see areas of transparency, which, for some people, I just drives them crazy. They hate that. Personally, I think in many places it's really cool. It just shows, I don't know, it adds an extra little bit of layer of complexity to a painting that I really like. I mean, there's a time and a place for totally flat, opaque paint, and then there's also a time for having, just that, it's like when you eat something at a nice restaurant and you're just like, you have something like French fries you've had millions of times before, and you're just like, whoa, these fries are good. I've never had French fries like that. That's kind of like what I like doing in a painting, is just giving it that extra little bit. That's why I like doing the Imprimatura, because it's just a little bit different. It causes people to think, well, now that's odd. That's unusual. I can't place it. Do I want to... If I do paint another layer, most of my brush strokes are going to disappear. So I think... I don't know. I'm going to blow dry this and just see if, as it dries, it's going to be a little bit more transparent, and will I be happy with that? And I might say, oh yeah, no, definitely need to do another layer, or go, actually, that's great. Let's keep it like that. So we'll find out. Well, that is so hard to... I can't tell if I like that or not. I'm going to put another layer of paint on here. Maybe not everywhere. But since I've got this paint, I'm going to use it. The thing is, each subsequent layer of paint is going to darken the and make this painting a little bit less luminous. It becomes more and more opaque, so it'll become darker and darker. Notice there's a bit of white coming off my brush. I think it's white, could be matte medium. Not such a bad thing if that happens, though. Okay, let's move on from the background. I gotta get my butt in gear here. Pretty close. So, you know, if I really wanted to be closer to the Ukrainian flag, probably would do another coat of blue. Actually, it would make it definitely deeper, a little bit darker. But I think for all intents and purposes, that's good. And again, it still preserves a bit of the luminosity of the background there. Interesting conversation Chris and CMD and Brian are having in the chat about using your left hand to draw as a way of, or like your, I suppose, weaker hand as a way of improving your drawing. There are some like techniques that encourage that kind of thing as a way of just, you know, expanding the mind and potentially increasing creativity, that kind of thing. It's absolutely not unheard of for artists to do things like that. I've heard of artists, you know, taking some time to try to paint with your feet, right? Or I've done projects where I did a whole year's worth of projects where I would blindfold myself or hide my hands while I was painting and drawing so I couldn't see what my hands were doing. Artists generally thrive with restriction, right? Often when you just say, you can do anything, most artists are like, oh, I don't know what to do, it's too much. Versus you sort of give them some parameters, and artists often find, oh, okay, that's an interesting challenge, I can work with those. Okay, I should move on here. Let's, I gotta leave here in about, an hour. Okay, Kate, we're on a... Okay, my next step here is to paint her clothing, her hair, and her skin tones. And I think probably where I might start actually is painting their skin on her face, because that is the part, the color that's in behind her hair and underneath her clothes. And generally I want to paint the thing that's furthest in behind, like the background color, so subsequent layers will kind of overlap that and create a nice seamless effect. So if we look at the original here, one thing I'm just noticing here is this painting is obviously painted on some kind of wood panel, plywood. Why did I put plywood? That's a little typo. So you can see the wood and the grain maybe cracking the surface of the painting, and you can really look at this, the tempera, how if the colors were a little bit different, the hairstyle is a little bit different, this would absolutely be like a dead ringer for a 700-year-old painting. Okay, so let's mix a skin tone. Let's get on the horse. So to make this skin tone, I'm going to start. I'm going to start with my warm yellow. I'm going to take a little bit of warm red. I'm going to make an orange, a yellow dominant orange. Then I'm going to take a little bit of warm blue, and that's going to turn this into a bit of a brown. Right, so it's no longer just an orange, it's slightly more brownish. I think that's okay, but it's hard to tell until we mix some white into it. Let's bring these up side by side. Excuse me. So I think that's pretty close. The one thing is I'm afraid if I do this, I might run out of paint halfway through. So I'm just going to make a bigger batch of this paint. Now that I kind of have an idea of what my ratios might be, that way I'm not going to run out of paint, you know, halfway through her face and then try to mix more paint. And then that's when things kind of start to get kind of quite frustrating, because then you've got multiple colors on her face, which is not necessarily a problem, but can cause people some distress. So now if I hadn't painted my underpainting lines there, I would probably want to add some medium to make this more transparent so that I don't obliterate all my pencil lines, because this is mostly white. This is maybe like what, 70-80% white, and so that white is super opaque, right? So now I can take this color and we'll kind of keep an eye on, let's say, her lips there, because we'll notice that they are going to probably completely disappear. Okay. So that's good for right now. I'm going to blow dry this just to see, as it dries, it's going to be a little bit more transparent, a bit more of that yellow is going to come through. And I just want to make sure that that's the right amount of painting. Now you could see almost all of my underlying lines, even with the brown underpainting I did, have almost entirely disappeared. So I just saw kind of there was a bit of texture, a brush stroke that went right across her face. So I'm just eliminating that, blending that out. Oops. I'm going to blow dry this. Okay, let's put in the color for her hair next. We'll do all the facial features in time here, but I just want to get all the colors in place. Because right now all those bright colors are a little bit distracting. It's hard for me to to really see what needs to be done until I get this taken care of. Now, her hair, actually, let's come back down. Her hair is very similar to a warm yellow, but it's just a little, like, even if it's a little bit more on the brown side. So I'm going to take my warm yellow, maybe I'll take a bit more of that warm yellow. Take some of my warm red, mix this in. Let's take more of this warm yellow. Oops. And a bit of warm blue into this mixture. So I'd say this is like 80% warm yellow, maybe 15% warm red, and 5% warm blue. Now, if you're having problems getting into some of these fine details, one of my little tips, things that I like doing, is taking my brush and kind of just scrubbing along the edge a little bit. And then you can clean it up with your brush straight up and down. Now I'm planning on, if I have time, going around with a brown and doing a little bit of an outline, or darker brown, doing a bit of outline around these edges. So I'm not too worried about it being like a seamless edge here, because that subsequent layer can kind of hide a bunch of that, but need to rotate this to get at these edges here. Then I'm just going to kind of quickly go back over to clean up any brush strokes. So that those brush strokes are kind of paralleling the shape of the way her hair goes down her frames her face there. Okay. Brian, thanks for the donation in the super chat. Just a small gift to say thank you for having these amazing classes in painting. Always enjoyed your videos and live streams. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's so generous of you, Brian. I really appreciate your support. You don't know how much it means to me that people like yourself support the channel and help pay some of the bills around here so that I can do this as often as I do. Okay, moving right along. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paint her clothing down here next. And it is a cool yellow. Like if I just paint that cool yellow all by itself over top there. Now it kind of looks like the right color just on camera at the moment, but first of all, there's these little blobs where I've painted, you know, I haven't been a little bit sloppy back there. So I want to cover those up. But I think I also want this to be a brighter, more intense yellow. Now, it might seem like that on camera, but this still looks pretty transparent. So what I'm going to do is, where should I do this? Let me take my cool yellow, bring it up here, and then I'm going to mix white into this yellow. So I'm putting a lot of white in here. I would say it's maybe like 60% white, maybe even more. So that means when I paint down here, it's going to cover up a lot of kind of maybe mistakes or these areas right there. Because if I just tried painting my cool yellow over top of that blue, good luck. I'd have to do 10 layers of it. You know, I'd be here for another 2 hours just going over and over and over. Whereas I just add a little bit of, well, a lot of white in here. I did that to speed this up. So this is going to make the yellow of her clothing here just glow bright yellow. I think I might even do a second coat of this, maybe not everywhere, but just in these areas where there was a little bit of that overpainting right here. So I'm going to blow dry this real quick. again. Great, is that actually dry enough? I think that's dry enough. Okay. So, I'm just gonna quickly take this paint off and clean this brush. I'll just say, like, right now I look at this and I'm like, feel like maybe I shouldn't have done that second coat of cool blue in the background. It does feels a little bit on the darker side of things, but I'm not gonna judge it until I'm getting closer to being done, especially until this other yellow, the cool yellow, gets into its proper place, because you never know until you get more of those colors there that it might actually be perfect. So that's why you just don't judge the painting too soon, right? Whoa! Yeah, okay, now I feel a lot better. Woo! There you go. That's why you withhold judgment as long as possible. Oh, that just, whoa, that glows. Whoa. I mean, it's all good. It's all good. It's just, wow, that cool yellow. This is the kind of thing even Andy Warhol would be like, I don't know, that's... You don't think it's a little bright, Michael? I'm going to blow dry this again, because as much as it looks great right now, I think there's a few areas of transparency that where there's the little bit of the tinted cool yellow below. I'm going to take care of that, so let's just see what it looks like. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna do just a little bit more, mostly just like little touch-ups here and there. Oddly enough, like a bunch of this paint is still wet. There's some pretty thick. This is pretty thick. All these layers of paint right here. So. I mean, that's a bright yellow. I think it's actually too much, too intense. Not bad. There could be a bit more warm yellow in there. But like I kind of think. I mean, I think it looks great on camera. The blue could, I mean, it could be darker according to the actual Ukrainian flag, but in person, just in the painting, I feel like it could have been a little bit lighter. One other thing that's kind of interesting is her skin tone. Now that I've got all these other colors around it, her skin tone feels a little bit more on the, it's got a little bit of a flushed reddish quality to it. It's not as light maybe as I'd want it to be. Not a big deal, but again, just things to notice. I'm not going to bother fixing it or anything. It's not bad, it's not wrong. It's just something to notice is that colors will appear to change over the course of the painting. Now, sometimes it literally is because the paint is, as it dries, it might get darker or lighter, but mostly it's just that colors are kind of relative depending on what the colors are that are adjacent, that are next to it. And so those colors might appear one way, and then you get more colors next to them, and then they appear a different way. Okay. Like even her hair now, in comparison to the yellow of her shirt, this brown that I put there definitely feels much darker. It no longer, like before it felt like a very like blonde hair. Now it starts to feel more like a bit of a strawberry blonde or very light brown hair. I don't know. I just find all of these things pretty wild. Now I am going to blow dry this again, just because now I want to start moving on to the next step, and I just want to make sure my arm's not going to be kind of rubbing across that surface. Moving right along. This is turning out great. I'm really happy with these colors. It is very, very intense set of colors. I do feel like maybe the foreground of her shirt could be a little bit warmer. That bright, cool yellow on her shirt is very loud. But, you know, and as I mentioned before, if I look at it next to the actual Ukrainian flag, you can really see how much warmer the flag is. I mean, just barely. We're talking like 10% warmer than the cool yellow I've put here. And we can also see that, you know, I think that's pretty close. It could be technically darker to match the actual flag, but actually in person, I feel like, oh, I almost feel like it should be a little bit lighter. But yeah, let's move forward. So, what do we want to look at next? What step should we go? CMD says, bye all, have a nice day, have a good afternoon or evening, morning, wherever you are. Okay. What's the best use of my time right now? As I've got to leave the house in less than an hour. Well, let's do the face. Let's start tackling the face, because if that's not finished, if we do a beautiful job on the hair but don't have time for the face, that is going to feel very unfinished. So, whereas if we finish the face but the hair is semi-incomplete, that's going to be something that probably isn't going to concern too many people. So maybe the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to paint the white of her eyes. Oops. Focusing on. There we go. So now the white of her eyes are not actually pure white. They're a little bit on the slightly bluish side. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of warm blue. I mean, we're talking like almost imperceptible amount of blue there. Because most of the time our eyes aren't actually white. We talk about the white of the eyes, but they're colored. Right? There's blood under there, there's veins. Right? So I guess you probably can't really see that so much on camera, but it's almost like a very, very light gray. Also, if you paint like bright white for eyes, it's going to make the eyes look kind of cartoony. And, you know, while some people might even say that this painting has a cartoony element to it, probably don't want to emphasize that aspect. So just that little bit slightly muted white. It's going to give just a little bit more of a natural quality to those eyes. I might need to do a second coat of that. I'm gonna move on, and I'm gonna work on the blush on her face next. Oops. Now, here's a dilemma. How do I want to teach this? Normally what I would do right now is use glazing fluid, but that might be too difficult for a beginner painter. I'm going to do it anyway, even if this is a beginner episode. I might, yeah. It's going to result in by far better results. So in order to do this, I'm using what's called glazing fluid. This is satin or matte, which means it's not glossy. And so I put this glazing fluid down here. I've got a bit of my skin color that I had before, so I'm just going to use that a little bit. And then I'm going to add a tiny bit of warm red to this mixture. Maybe a little bit more. That's a lot more. That's more than I was oh, that's a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to dilute it then by rubbing it into some more of my skin color. Of course, it barely makes a difference. Okay, maybe it wasn't so bad after all. Let's put this. Okay, put that there. And then you want to use another brush that is very soft and dry to kind of blend this out. I don't even know if any of that shows up on camera at all. And then just wipe off any excess paint from your blending brush. There we go. I'm gonna blow dry. Well, you know what? I'm actually while I've got this paint on my brush, I'm gonna go under her eyebrows here. I'll just put a bit of this color up there. I'll put a bit on her nose as well, and maybe just a little bit on the bottom of her chin here. And then once again, just use my blending brush. You don't want to wait too long, because the longer you wait to blend it, the more it's going to kind of settle in. Okay, it's probably very, very hard to see, but I'm just going to now blow dry this. I'm going to do just another quick layer of this. Just make these cheeks just a little bit darker. Now I've made a little bit of a mess there. I'm going to clean that up in a moment. I'm going to take a bit of water on a rag and just wipe that away. Ay. Okay, let's wipe that away there too. Okay, let's blow dry that. Brian asks a great question. Will you ever do an in-depth class about specific human body parts and structures while in perspective? Holy smokes. That's a great idea. I mean, that is super specific. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There is probably an audience for... why is that? That's not drying the way I'd want it to. Okay, so I feel like one thing I've just done here... Whoa, okay. Is I might have gone a little bit overboard with this, the blush. So I'm gonna go back the other way with a bit of the remainder of my skin color and kind of just lighten back up again. So, but I want to blow dry this first before I doodle or noodle around in here. I'm a little bit conscious of the fact that this is, I feel like, way more advanced techniques than I planned on doing today. So if you're just like, whoa, I don't know about this, this is more difficult than I thought, you don't have to do any of this. You don't have to put the blush on her face like I'm doing. I'm definitely doing something that I wasn't planning on doing. So what I'm doing is I felt like I didn't like how this was blending. So now I'm kind of taking her skin tone and coming back over top and just sort of cleaning up some of these edges where I felt like it needs a little bit lighter. That's cool. I like that. That's funny. Oops, maybe that was... Okay, I should move on from that. That's barely even a part of this original painting anyway, so... Okay, let's move on, Michael. Move on. That is a great suggestion, Brian. Where would I even start with that? Is there a specific body part that you're thinking you'd like to see in perspective, like hands or feet or something? Just to give me mentally a place where I should think about starting. I'm gonna come back to those eyes, and I'm just gonna do that same sort of thing with my blue. Oops. What should I do now? Let's do some... Let's paint her lips. So I'm going to take my warm red. I'm just going to take this glazing fluid I had here before. So I don't know if I really want it to be bright red, like she's wearing bright red lipstick. You know, often little kids, little girls aren't walking around in bright red lipstick, so probably don't want to use just bright red right out of the jar. I'm going to dilute it a little bit. I'm even wondering if this is a bit too much. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of my warm yellow, mix this in there. It's going to be slightly more orangey. Which might seem, oh, well, you don't want orange lips, but it's, there we go. Maybe. Just noticing somehow those lips seem slightly asymmetrical. So I'm just going to move things just a little bit here to the right. That's great. Okay. You know what? Now I'm going to take... I've got this brown left over from near the very beginning of the episode. Remember when I did my underpainting? I'm just going to use this to do some outlining on her face. I don't need a lot of it because the outlining is pretty subtle, and so that's pretty dark as it is actually. So take a bit more warm yellow. I'm going to put glazing fluid in here just to make it a bit more transparent and also easier to paint with. Also, you know what? I should paint her irises right now. So I'm going to quickly transition here. Taking my warm blue with a little bit of white in here. It's a bit too much. Now these can be bigger. The circles of the iris could be a little bit bigger, but I'm going to start small, because the reason I'm starting small is if I realize, oh, one eye's a little bit pointing to the right or something, then I can adjust one side to kind of match. So I just kind of start out with where I think they should be, and then start expanding and enlarging them from there. Okay, I think that's okay. I think they could be bigger, but I am going to be doing outlines around there, and so I feel like that's probably good enough. Okay, so now let's use the brown that I mixed for doing some outlining. So look how kind of relatively faint these lines are. That one's a little bit more opaque. You know, in the original they are very, very subtle. But I don't mind if they're a little bit more visible today in my painting. Going to make us just mixed a slightly darker brown. So I just went back into this mixture. I'm just taking this brown here. Doing this kind of thing, if you're a beginner artist, is definitely tricky. This would be the kind of thing that if you might find much easier to do with something like a Posca pen. All right, these Posca pens we talked about a little bit earlier, you could just basically draw those lines rather than painting them, and that would probably make your life a lot easier. Now I'm going to go back to my lighter brown. Just maybe put a couple quick little. back to my darker brown. Ah. Slightly different personality-wise, especially with those eyes. You can see in the original there, that line is supposed to just, this is mostly just one singular curve. So it kind of comes up and then down. I didn't do that in my painting. I don't know why. I just I got into it, and so that's okay. It doesn't have to look exactly the same. I'm just gonna take a bit of this bright red right out of the tube. Inside her mouth is just bright red. Might even want to wait till that dries and do a second layer of it. I want to do still a little bit more with her eyes that I want to do, but I'm just going to now go around the painting and add more of this darker brown. Brian says, oh, there's lots of more comments. There's Kathy. Oh, hi, Kathy. Just getting home. Oops. Watching while unpacking my suitcase. Cool. Brian says, yeah, the painting's coming along beautifully, especially the background of the Ukrainian flag. How's everyone doing? Great. Well, all's better in the world now that you're here with us, Kathy, so thanks for, I hope you had a good trip. curious if there's any artwork that's going to emerge from your voyage. You know, one thing that is kind of neat about adding a little bit of this transparency, a little bit of the glazing fluid into this painting. Is that in focus? Here. Why is this? Is it, you can see that it's a little bit like fresco painting, or tempera painting on fresco. You can see the kind of the transparency that it's created. I really like that effect. So that's something, if we used Posca pens to do all of this, we would be really hard pressed, oops, to get a little bit of paint there, just wipe that away. We'd be pretty hard pressed to see those results. Actually, you know what, I should blow dry this, because I'm going to be painting with my hand going over top of the surface there, and I think it might smear some. Got about a half hour before I gotta run out the door here. Now there isn't this dark brown outline around the outer edges. But I'm going to put it there anyway, just to kind of clean up my edges. Paint's kind of dried out a bit. That's cool. It just sharpens up the colors in the that edge of the blue where it meets her hair. May not use that color quite that dark again. I'm gonna mix it back a little bit into, yeah, it's probably still a bit dark. Let's take a bit more of that warm yellow. Doing this type of detail work can be really time consuming. So, and I've got less than half an hour before I have to be running out the door. So part of the trick is focusing on what are the most important little details that I absolutely feel like I must get in, and then where can I cut some corners here. Because I'm probably not going to do a part 2 to this when I've got, 20-30 minutes remaining of work. It's kind of so what I'm doing is probably going to do like every third or second line, and then if I've got time, then I'll go back and do the lines in between the lines, rather than do all the lines on one side of the face and then come back and do the lines on the other side of the face and so on. Just gonna do every second line here. 20 minutes. Okay. Another option would be to use acrylic inks or fluid acrylics to paint this kind of thing, because they're going to be much thinner and allow you to paint these kind of lines in with maybe a... You won't have to be dipping into the paint quite so often. They'll be less broken than my lines currently are. I mean, I'm going about as fast as I can to do this, and so it's going to result in a little bit of sloppiness. But that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, I would say it's probably best if it's not perfect.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with
Okay, there's my Amazon device just chatting with me. So, some of the lines on this side of the face, they're definitely closer together than on the other side of the face. So I'll probably have to go just do a couple of little lines in between some lines just to kind of balance it out on the other side of the face. back on this side. Okay, I'm going to rotate. This will be easier to do it this way. Okay, I got 10 minutes. Back to her mouth here. Let's put a little bit more red there. Her eyes. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to my brown here. Let's now take this cool blue, mix it into this dark brown, and make a black. So you see how just adding more of that cool blue into this brown. Now I got a black. Beautiful. Just darkening it a couple, maybe a little bit more than I maybe should have, but just underneath the nose and the top lip, we would expect it to be a little bit darker. I did the same thing with the top of her eyelids, just darken those down a tiny bit. One thing I'm just going to do as well while I'm right here, just take a little bit of white, pure white. I'm just going to put a couple little tiny little bits of white, almost imperceptible little highlights on her eyes. The last thing, I just want to draw some of here. Maybe let's just do okay, we're almost done. Just a few little last minute details here on her clothing, and then I think we're ready to move on for the evening. So basically it's just maybe some stitching around her collar and then just the armpits, and we're good to go. So well, actually maybe let's bring these two up here. Oh, that is weird. She does look like my daughter. Wow. Okay, so these I want to use kind of like a similar to this brown I've been using, maybe just a little bit more on the warm yellow side of things. Maybe just a bit of this. Is this going to be dark enough? I have maybe, because the painting kind of ends right there, I maybe should have made her shoulders maybe less broad. It does make her look a little bit larger and wider than she is in the original, but hey, that's not such a bad thing. Okay, yeah, I gotta wrap up here. I think that's okay. There's lots, wow, tons of comments here. I'm gonna, okay, might have to get to those things, read those after I get my daughter later to, so. We have made it to the end of the episode, and it's time to take a look at these two paintings side by side and kind of evaluate how they turned out and whether we could have done something different or better. So, just quickly before we do so, a quick reminder to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. 60% of people who watch this video are probably not subscribers, but if you just hit that one little button, it's going to change my life dramatically if just an extra 20% of people hit that button. So I also hit the notification bell so you know when future episodes are taking place, because I don't always do them at this particular time of day. If you really would like me to do more of them, then again, hitting that notification bell, supporting the channel would certainly inch me more into that direction for sure. And thank you, Brian, earlier for your donation as well. I appreciate that. To donate to the channel, you can use the QR code there, and then or go to the PayPal link. Those links are down below in the video description, and it will allow you take you to a page similar like this where you can safely donate to support the channel. And again, I really appreciate everybody's support. Other ways you could donate: you could send an e-transfer or a check in the mail. You can use the YouTube super chat like Brian did earlier. All those ways to help support the channel. My email is on the Facebook group and on my website. Those links are down below. I don't just mention them off the top because, especially in an episode like this, I'll be bombarded, get dozens and dozens and dozens of emails, and I'm sure after this episode airs, I'll have to go back and delete all the Russian trolls that'll have all sorts of nasty things to say, but that's the price of speaking up for what's important, right? So also consider joining our Facebook group, uploading your artwork to the Facebook group so that we can celebrate your achievement, whether it's the painting like we're doing here by Kasperovych today, or it's one of the drawings. It's part of the drawing series I did years ago. I still give people free feedback on that. So join the Facebook group, upload your work to the group, and we would love to see it. So there's the original painting, or actually the original painting is square. I've enlarged the top and the bottom, and then I also changed the colors to reflect the Ukrainian flag. And based upon people's suggestions today, that's what I've done with the painting itself that I created. So there's my version. Maybe I'll zoom out just for a second. Zoom out just a little bit more so you see the whole painting simultaneously. There we go. So, pretty close. They're in terms of color, I'm pretty happy with the way they turned out. Obviously, there's a lot more detail in the hair, but I've just ran out of time, so I don't have time to do all those details. But I think it's good enough. I don't feel like I lack the painting's lacking in any way. So, how about let's zoom into different parts of this painting and just check it out. Maybe we'll just go to the hair here. Okay. So, you know, a couple things is you can notice that my brushstrokes are a little bit sloppy, a little bit messy, but the transparency of the paint does bring us a little bit closer to tempera painting or fresco painting, which is something that deeply inspired Kasperovych, as well as his good friend Michael Wojciech. So, you know, I feel like that actually, you know, generally sometimes that stuff I don't like, but in this case, a little bit of glazing fluid, thinning the paint down, kind of manages to help recreate that look. Same thing in the background. Remember, I added some matte medium to make the background blue. It's just slightly transparent. So we have a little bit more of those kind of brush strokes that are kind of visible, like these very subtle, semi-transparent layers of paint. You can see it's more visible in his painting than it is in mine. It's a tricky thing, because I felt like if I did do that, and I had the painting a little bit closer to that at one point, but I did decide to kind of lighten or darken it down a little bit, make it a bit more opaque. Okay. Let's maybe go to this side. Yeah, some of those lines could be better defined, but I think it's going to be okay. Let's look at the face now. You know, interestingly enough, mine looks, you know, a little bit more, quote-unquote, well, I would say it looks a little bit more realistic. I mean, they're both very still kind of Byzantine or cartoony. I don't mind it like that, but it's interesting how just slight difference. Oh, I missed her kind of little double chin there, but that's okay. I don't have time to fix it. Okay. Excellent. Okay, everybody, thank you once again for joining me for another episode, and consider to donate to various different Ukrainian causes down in the description below to support the men and women who are fighting for democracy as we speak right now under rockets and shells from Russian invaders. And hopefully, despite the fact this is the 3rd year of the invasion, the anniversary, a sad day, but also in some ways a day of celebration that Ukraine has been able to repel what was once thought to be the 2nd greatest military in the world. So there's a bit of pride there that Ukraine is able to push back against such an overwhelming force. And hopefully we won't have to do a 4th anniversary next year, and one would hope that this terrible situation, the war, ends as soon as possible in favor of Ukraine, and not what Donald Trump and Putin want to do and carve the country up like the world powers did after World War II and World War I, etc. Anyway, Singa says, when's the next live? There might be one tomorrow. We'll have to see the time and all that kind of stuff, but I'll post stuff on the Facebook group. So again, join the Facebook group, subscribe to the channel so you know when those episodes take place. Have a wonderful afternoon, morning, day, wherever you are on our beautiful planet. Just know that making art is making our world a better, more peaceful place. If everyone had some creative way of expressing themselves, we would live in a much more beautiful and peaceful world. So thank you for helping to make our world a little bit better. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the sunshine or the rain. Good night and good luck, folks. We'll see you soon. Bye.